Looking at UVTV, motherfucker. I'm at a kick spiritual ass deals for my people. On God. Neon nigga for Feather May year. And today I'm gonna be talking about how to look at New Year's and New Year's resolutions from an overall perspective so you don't get super flunked out into the Gregorian calendar, which is based off the Julian calendar and shit like that. So you don't get lost in January 1st and white man holidays and their perspective of when they was tracking these things, and actually get your New Year's resolutions, like the way y'all be calling New Year's resolutions and stuff like that, so you can be more in sync, so you actually can make that manifestation and materialize that in reality in so much different form for, you know what I'm saying, being more in sync and relatable and actually doing it from an overall perspective. And why a lot of time people will start New Year's resolution and then they never finish it, but it's always the starting point of when they started doing it and the intention behind it based upon what I'm talking about right now. So, right, like we already know that the Gregorian calendar is based off the Julian calendar, right? And that was based upon like the Romans and shit like that. And the Gregorian calendar was made during the 1500s with like the Pope and stuff like that. That's when that first got initiated, during the 1500s and shit like that. And then we already know 1600s, 1700s, and 1800s, it was doing a whole bunch of physical colonizing and things of that nature, because the tracking system based upon the time we be using, it's just based upon the seasonal transitions in the pockets of the sun and the phases of the moon and stuff like that, right? Because like I just said, it was based upon the Aztecs and the Mayans and the Native Americans, to make it like really, really simple, who actually made this tracking system. And then once they came to Mesopotamia and stuff like that, in the civilization over here and things of that nature, they was learning these things and getting different interpreters to figure out what that means based upon the knowledge of wisdom. They was doing it based upon trying to learn their ways and shit. And we're using England man terminology and stuff like that because we're speaking English, so that's England like. So like R type of language and stuff like that. This is why they put a lot of emphasis on the words like R and V and like Q and stuff like that. That's a different video for the most part, but based upon them taking that knowledge and learning the different pockets of the sun and the seasonal transitions and stuff like that, right? That's why we have different time zones in the 24-hour clock system and things of that nature, right? And they put certain holidays, holy days, or sacred days that they made up to make people celebrate these things based upon them trying to feed into some type of Saturnalia, like during Christmas and stuff like that, or different pockets of time during the, you know what I'm saying, the 12 months and the 4 seasons and like the 12 houses and the 12 zodiac signs and stuff like that. It's a whole rotation and stuff like that. But this main spiritual system and the creators of these things, who was like actually piece these things together and figure these things out, is Native Americans, Mayans, and Aztecs and shit like that, right? And one of the main things they like to do is to document and write these things down and stuff like that. And then we in 2026, so they've been doing that for over 2,000 years. And we already know there was life before 2,000 years ago. And then they actually got that more officialized and, you know what I'm saying, had different methods of translating these things to where we have what we have right now, all the way down to the Gregorian calendar and things of that nature, right? So based upon these things, they call it shit based upon centuries and like decades and stuff like that. So the century, like putting down like a century turret in Call of Duty, like a watchtower, is them observing it, is them tracking these things down. That's why we have things like AD and BC, before the Common Era or before Christ and stuff like that. It's always going to be a religious aspect combined with like the reality aspect. So some people who are religious like that, they're gonna call it BC, but they also include before Christ, because based upon Abrahamic religion, Christianity and stuff like that, all these different things is based upon the Romans and Christianity and like the Pope and stuff like that, who initiate these things first, because it's them taking a whole bunch of different spirituality from other cultures and stuff like that, so they can be the dominant ones. That's why in previous videos when I'm talking about monotheism, especially when it comes to Abrahamic religion and things of that nature, right, it's always them trying to play God in the physical and stuff like that, because we can see in reality, right? Why would that be a new year when we're in the middle of winter? We're in the middle of winter. So during wintertime, it's cold. Everything's dead. Everything's, you know what I'm saying? Like you can't fertilize life during that time and stuff like that. It's gonna be too cold. You know what I'm saying? It's not gonna be as fertile. The crops gonna be all dead. That's why during the fall time or the end of summertime, during harvest season and stuff like that, people get all the animals and get all the food and all the crops stored up. So during that wintertime, we have safety, security, and food, and you know what I'm saying? Like shelter just in general, so we can survive during that time period. And from like a natural, the fuck, shit, fuck the from like the natural perspective, right? That's why a lot of times we be seeing animals be going through these transitions and stuff like that naturally, because that's why bears will go into hibernation during the wintertime and stuff like that and sleep through those 3 months and stuff like that until it becomes springtime. The springtime or the spring equinox and stuff like that, like how scientists be calling it and stuff like that, is the actual time you should be renewing these things, because what happens during spring? Spring is blooms. Spring is germinating a seed. Spring is springing something off. Spring is creating new things and stuff like that. And you see that in the overall perspective, overall atmosphere, overall like natural nature. When it comes to stuff you see in reality, that's when plants start growing. That's when pollens start coming in and stuff like that. Bees and the birds and everything, all the animals start coming back out for the most part. So from that being shown based upon like Mother Earth and the natural perspective and stuff like that, that's what you actually see in reality. And it don't take no human interpretation to see that for the most part. So from them making y'all look at things in a real backwards type perspective, when you start planting that seed during the middle of wintertime, aka Aquarius season and stuff like that, you're gonna be working backwards. You know what I'm saying? So that's why you either will lose motivation, or like the way you try to manifest and materialize, it don't happen the way you want it to happen because you're doing it during the wrong time from like an overall perspective. So during the last days of March and like the beginning of April, aka Aries season, that's the time you should actually start initiating and sparking that seed of initiating, creating new ways, and being in charge of your fire, of what you see, your visions, and putting yourself first and actually like going for it and stuff like that. And then you'll see more fruitful results if you kept that consistency of during that 12-month cycle for the most part. So yeah, like they show that just based upon what they be calling the 12 months and stuff like that. The 12 months, the 12 houses, the 12 zodiac signs, the 360 wheel, and stuff like that. The zodiac wheel from an overall perspective. So from us seeing that and how we have different sun pockets and different type of atmospheres and environment based upon those different sun pockets. That's why you could be in Atlanta and it's one time zone and stuff like that, and it's gonna be daytime, right? But if you go to Alaska, their daytime is gonna be a little bit longer, and their nighttime are shorter compared to being over here in the South, in the middle of the United States, and shit like that. So like, yeah, I'm just trying to make things like from like a really, really simplified perspective, so how you can look at it. So that would be a better, more efficient way of if you want to manifest and materialize these things, and how to look at these holidays and these holidays, aka these things that are sacred to them, right? And you can separate yourself from these things, and then you can see the actual mechanism, the natural mechanism, instead of their mechanism. So it make it so you don't feel like, you know what I'm saying? Like you won't even, like the more we feed more into that, you start seeing through the reality of like, oh, like that's what we doing every time we celebrate New Year's and stuff like that. We're really just celebrating like being in the middle of winter. We're really just celebrating being in the middle of Aquarius season, and we gonna take a shot to that and stuff like that. We're really just celebrating January 1st, aka when they want you to start, when they want you to, you know what I'm saying, be in that perspective of feeling like you're in renewal and oh, it's time to go into a new year. So new cycles and new ways of how to go about things and stuff like that. It's already gonna put you in an overall perspective, like spiritually, and it's going to play out mentally and physically of you kind of being like off track, and it's going to feel like by the time it gets to springtime and stuff like that, you have to play catch up, because that's literally what's going to happen. That's, you know what I'm saying, like it's like you're going to be doing shit with like a handicap for like dead ass like 4 months until that March, April sections start coming out, and then by the time I get to there and stuff like that, you kind of have to like, you know what I'm saying? Like skip a couple steps and stuff like that, and like reinvigorate to get that same energy and charge that you did based upon January 1st. But it's always because you start from the wrong starting point based upon all these things. So that's just a more simplified version of how to move more divinely or heavenly or celestial, aka the atmosphere and stuff like that. So the same way how you be looking at the atmosphere, aka the sphere at most, the world at most and stuff like that, based upon the actual transitions between the sun and the moon, right? You know what I'm saying? Like the lunar cycles and the sun cycles, like aka the sun rising and the sun setting and stuff like that. Even though it's not really setting, it's just the orbit that we on based upon the planet that we on based upon our rotation and stuff like that, and our reaction and correspondence behind these things, and the natural mechanism that we see, or the godly mechanism, or the overall mechanism that we actually see in reality for the most part, and not getting lost into some white man human curated shit to stumble y'all and shit.